Hey all, here are OS Reviews. In this video, we're taking a quick look at the Soundcore by Anker AeroFit 2s, their latest gen open-ear true wireless buds, which are a pretty nice upgrade over the original gen AeroFits in almost all areas except for one spec that we'll touch on more later in this video. But first, taking a closer look at some of the features this time around, the newest gen model now comes equipped with an adjustable fit. You can snap into various angles. Depending on your ear size, it may feel a little bit more comfortable compared to almost all of the other open design buds on the market is pretty much a one-size-fit-all. So as you can tell here, you can tilt this a little bit more forward or back, kind of like temples on a pair of glasses, allowing for a more customized fit. In fact, here's a closer look at that hinge in action. And to serve as better reference, here are the original AeroFits. Again, it doesn't really snap into a specific spot, so we do have improved ergonomics this time around. In addition, it now comes with even larger drivers, which are 20 millimeters at their widest point. And they also claim there's a slightly larger acoustic chamber this time around that will further kind of amplify the sound to give you slightly more immersive audio, and that is compared to 14 millimeter drivers on the first generation AeroFits, as well as 16 millimeters on the AeroFit Pros, which were more premium and expensive. So a larger driver inside should technically provide, again, slightly more volume as well as perhaps a touch more bass as well. Furthermore, the second generation now has built-in Qi wireless charging support on the battery case, which was missing on the original AeroFit and also the Pro model, so you can just pop this on for a quick top-up instead of plugging in a cable for some added convenience. And the last function that has been upgraded includes support now for the LDAC audio codec, making the AeroFit 2's high-res audio wireless certified. And to those unfamiliar, LDAC can provide up to 3 times more detail when transmitted via Bluetooth compared to standard codecs of SBC and AAC, thanks to the Hi-Fi certification. However, keep in mind that LDAC is currently only supported on Android devices because it was originally developed by Sony, and so if you're an iOS user, an iPhone user, you probably won't get the full advantage out of that particular element. That said, it's still nice to have, and previously you would have to purchase the more expensive AeroFit Pros to get LDAC support. Now it's found on just the base model. So they're making many of the more premium features from last gen now available on the base version this time around. And all of this is presented in a slightly more streamlined appearance, a little bit more elegant looking perhaps, with a few more colors, including this pale green version which is new, available at the same price point as last gen. So a pretty decent upgrade, at least here on paper. And if we come back to the one aspect that isn't really an upgrade, that would be the ingress rating, aka the waterproof rating. The new ones are rated to be IP55, however the previous gen were IPX7. So as a footnote, IPX7 is technically a higher waterproof resistance rating that can be submerged up to 1 meter of water for 30 minutes, compared to IP55 is just rated against rain, splashes, and sweat. And although that's probably sufficient for most, it does mean that you can't really take them for a shower, for instance, or if you drop it into a pool, unlike the original gen. That might be a compromise of having a newer design with more moving parts because of that hinge, and so a little harder to reach the same waterproof rating, but it is what it is. Otherwise, battery performance is virtually the same, both rated to last up to 42 hours combined, with the battery case providing a few extra top-ups. However, on a continuous use, the new one's lasting around 10 hours, the previous one may be just a touch longer at 11 hours, but again, there's not a huge difference there, probably because the newer model again has larger drivers, probably using up a bit more juice to drive as well. Otherwise, one of the reasons why you may want to consider a pair of open-style buds like these would be for the situational awareness. Unlike Soundcore's Liberty series, which are also quite popular, that are really known for their active noise cancellation, blocking things out a bit more of a tighter seal, these are actually resting right outside of your ear canals. And so there's not quite as much pressure as you're wearing them for longer sessions, for things like exercise, jogging, going to the gym, running, things like that. Similar to bone conduction, you can still be aware if you're crossing a busy street without removing them. However, the downside is you really won't get any active noise cancellation on a pair like these. They don't really block out noise. So whether or not a design like these will be ideal depends on how you intend to use them and also your lifestyle habits. These ones arguably being better for exercise and sports use outdoors compared to commuting with a traditional silicone tip style. Some final specs include support for fast charging, so just 10 minutes will give you up to 4 hours of continuous listening time. You can pop it back into the case for a rapid top-up, as well as support for the Soundcore companion app like all of their other products, allowing you to further adjust properties like EQ controls available for both iOS and Android. Now, one thing I will say though is compared to actual bone conduction tech, this is more specified as air conduction, and that is because it's still using a traditional speaker or driver. It's just a little bit larger and placed close to your ear as you're wearing them, compared to actual bone conduction, which kind of uses vibrations to instead transmit the sound. So although they both have a similar design and both are open sounding at the end of the day, giving you that ambient awareness, they aren't exactly the same. I just point that out because if you are working in construction, for instance, that's sometimes an area where you would want to look for bone conduction tech, just because regardless of how loud the external noise is, since it's getting transmitted by those vibrations, you're still able to hear the audio compared to these, may struggle a bit more if it is extremely loud around you. Some of the features include enhanced comfort thanks to a liquid silicone material this generation are also advertised, and on the inside, aside from the buds, we also get a USB Type-C charging cable, as well as a user manual and a quick start guide. They do rely on touch controls, which are remappable in the companion app if you want to bring back functions like volume, play, pause, answering calls. The battery case is still crafted out of plastic. It has a matte texture to it, but this time around there's a larger LED light strip on the front which will glow as it's pairing, as well as kind of give you a subtle indication if there is power inside or not. Looks quite cool compared to on the original gen AeroFit, LED dots underneath instead, compared to that more continuous light bar strip. And the casing overall is still compact in terms of being slim enough to fit into a pocket, although admittedly it is a hair wider this time around, a little bit closer to the dimensions of the AeroFit Pro model from last gen, as you can tell, somewhere in the middle. And then located on the very back is just a reset button as well as a USB Type-C port for charging. Again, the Qi wireless charging support on the battery case is going to be a new feature this time around, and if we pop it onto a compatible kind of Qi charging mat or phone that has reverse wireless charging, you can quickly top up the buds if you are in a pinch. Opening the case, buds are still held into place magnetically pretty securely, and regardless of what angle you're choosing with the new hinge design, you're still able to fit them into the case and close it up without any issues, which is also why the new case might be just a touch wider compared to the original gens that only had that one angle. As for the buds themselves, they are indeed very lightweight, crafted out of, again, liquid silicone on the parts touching your ear, as well as some matte plastic here on the front, which is going to be touch sensitive. Got a slightly curved design that is a little reminiscent of some of the Samsung Galaxy buds that is bean-like in its shape, but conforming quite well as you're wearing them, and the entire back is coated with that soft touch rubber, making it very comfy as you're wearing it, providing some extra resistance. And otherwise, we can see the kind of speaker meshes here, which are still crafted out of metal, as well as a couple of microphones when you are answering calls. As reference, here's a side-by-side with the original gen AeroFits, and they're not too far apart when it comes to overall weight and dimensions, albeit the AeroFit 2 maybe is just a touch wider here to accommodate the larger driver inside, perhaps just a little bit more streamlined looking from a design perspective. And here it is next to the AeroFit 1 Pros as well. In fact, it seems like the Pros are a little chunkier, which is surprising since these now have even larger drivers inside. Pretty impressive from an engineering perspective, although the Pros do have a physical button that you could also press on for a little bit more tactility. Here's one final look at the differences here on the back from a design perspective. And now briefly exploring the Soundcore companion app, it's pretty quick to pair once you have Bluetooth turned on, and you're able to gauge the battery percentage remaining on the buds as well as the casing. From here we're able to adjust the built-in EQ, including Soundcore Signature, there's bass boosted, classical, acoustic, as well as under more you can find a few more presets, including podcast, dance, electronic, jazz, R&B, spoken word for things like audiobooks, treble, enhanced, so on and so forth. Really not bad. Plus a custom EQ profile style, which allows you to adjust the frequency sliders yourself. Plus, something that's kind of neat is even if you're using the default sound, you can reference the sound curve from the tuning and also tap on custom, allowing you to take a closer look at how it's tuned, as well as make smaller micro adjustments yourself. Although it is technically missing the hearing test or hear ID mode, which you do find on some of their more flagship grade in-ear style headphones, usually playing back a series of sounds, and then you can tap on if you prefer sound 1 or 2 for it to automatically create your own personalized EQ. On here it's still something you have to manually select, but it's a fair selection. You can also choose a 3D surround sound mode, which is kind of like another EQ profile as opposed to being real spatial audio with head tracking. That is a function still reserved on the Pro model. What that means is these don't have built-in accelerometers that detect your head's position as you're moving around. It's not going to dynamically change the sound, but using digital processing, it's going to make the audio perhaps feel a little bit more like you're in a movie theater, adding a slight sense of immersion for certain tracks, for example, again, movies and perhaps gaming that you can pick between. The next tab over is going to be controls, again, remapping what these correlate to. You can trigger a single tap, double, 3-tap, or tap and hold for both the left as well as the right sides, again, adding functionality including volume, skip track commands, or disabling them if you want to prevent any accidental triggers. And the AeroFit 2s do support multi-point connectivity, so you can connect to up to 2 devices simultaneously, including a laptop and a phone, and as you play back audio, it will automatically switch back and forth based on which device is playing back audio, and you can also find a low latency gaming mode here as well. However, this is kind of the opposite of LDAC. It's something that we've touched on before, but with LDAC, it's trying to transmit as much detail as possible using Bluetooth, and as a result, it may have slightly increased latency. But for gaming mode, it's trying to compress some of the data being transmitted and giving you a slightly smoother playback experience. Perhaps also good if you're watching fast-paced action movies, for instance. So if you're listening to just music, I would generally recommend turning it off for the best audio experience, but you can flick it on depending on if you find it to be a little bit too laggy for video or gaming content. Now, under more options, you can also find a volume balance adjustment. So if you are listening to a track that isn't really well recorded because the audio is skewed towards the left or right, you can manually correct that using this mode. And under sound mode is where you're able to flick on the LDAC functionality. By default, it is using the standard SBC and AAC found with Bluetooth 5.4. So again, if you want the highest audio quality possible and you're using an Android device, this is where that option will be found. You can also turn on and off certain touch tones as well as prompts if you wanted to disable those alerts, as well as a auto power off function if it hasn't been used or music isn't playing back for longer than X minutes, plus a Find My Device will play back a sound on the left and right sides, basically at 100% volume, so if they've fallen under a sofa or couch, you can still find them if you are nearby and still connected by Bluetooth. So pretty simple and straightforward, and of course standards that you get in the Soundcore app include on the main page under the middle tab. You can also play back some white noise nature sounds. It's a pretty thoughtful extra that was added in recent updates. So again, if you're feeling a little stressed or trying to use them to calm down, drift into sleep, you can find various types of nature noises now directly in the Soundcore app. Now moving into performance, when it comes to connectivity, they were definitely quite reliable, never got any interruptions or disconnections as long as I was within around the same room, 10 meters or so from my phone. Comfort was also excellent as advertised thanks to the new hinge design, making them a lot more adjustable, again regardless of if you're wearing glasses. It does make them super comfy. In fact, they were almost invisible as I was wearing them around and honestly forgot after a couple of minutes that they were on. So if you are using them for a couple of hours continuously, it's not going to really bring any stress or strain, and I did feel like the sound quality itself was also quite clean, something that we've touched on with other bone conduction and air conduction headsets. Since it isn't using silicone tips to actually fit snugly into the ear canals, as a result it's sometimes harder for the bass to really come across as aggressively or strongly, and that is really an area where using larger speakers or drivers can be helpful in making a difference. And so compared to similar types of open sounding buds, I would say that these are definitely a little bit stronger because of the larger 20mm drivers. They are noticeably punchier if you're listening to drum beats, lower frequency sounds, but they're still not going to be the heaviest in terms of bass I've ever heard out of a pair of wireless buds or headphones, because it's always a challenge of physics almost that you really won't get the exact same experience due to the speaker being a little bit further away. But all in all, it's certainly not bad, and particularly with some of the EQ profiles, including Soundcore Signature and also bass boosted, you overall still get a pretty satisfactory experience, still very enjoyable, all things considered, for pop music, EDM music that you're listening to. Mids and trebles, though, are perhaps slightly more heavily emphasized, and on those aspects, I think it provides plenty of detail when you're listening to instrumentals as well as vocals, sounding very clean, and also not too shrill or piercing either, even at higher volume levels, which, speaking of, they get plenty loud as well, also again thanks to the larger speakers inside. And briefly touching on the built-in mics, even though that's not really the main emphasis I would argue on these buds, they're still mostly about the ambient awareness and just using them from casual music listening, compared to buds that have more of a traditional stem design, and the microphone can be a little bit closer to your mouth. Sometimes makes it easier if you are communicating in really loud spaces. On here though, they're just around average. I wouldn't say that this is a regard that's changed too much compared to the first generation pairs, which is to say it's usable enough in most indoor scenarios, but if you are primarily getting a pair just for making calls, then there are certainly other ones out there with perhaps more sophisticated ENC and mic placements, and these are again primarily designed for their excellent comfort as well as for general casual music listening. So that is more or less it as far as our quick hands-on look at the brand new Soundcore by Anker AeroFit 2s. And I gotta say that compared to Gen 1, they have done a pretty decent job of upgrading a lot of these areas, from having now high-res audio certification, getting wireless charging support, a significantly larger driver that does provide a touch more volume as well as bass, in addition to an even more comfortable design thanks to the added ergonomics of the hinge, which you can also wear around the office or if you're commuting outdoors, exercising, things like that, and you can know what's happening, have a conversation without removing the buds. This might be a interesting choice to consider. That being said, again, if you are primarily getting a pair for traveling, things like on trains, cars, or flights, and you want to block out noise, just keep in mind that this type of category is catering towards a slightly different crowd. But all in all, not a bad upgrade, as well as a pretty stylish pair to boost with overall solid enough sound and stable performance. You can check out more details if interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. These have been the Soundcore by Anker AeroFit 2 True Wireless Buds.